All right, we have multiple important stories. The lame duck president, Joe Biden, just brought us to an inch of all-out war. We are as close as we've been since the Cuban Missile Crisis. And Republicans, where are they? Republicans in the Senate cheering this insane decision on. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, hasn't said a word about it either. And now Putin has responded. Putin warned the US and NATO a few weeks ago, changing his nuclear doctrine to allow first strike authority. Joe Biden then called his bluff a few days ago. Well, it just blew up in Biden's face. We have the latest. Also, this has got to be the best 2 minutes of television I've seen all year. Fireworks erupting on the Pierce Morgan show with Cenk Yugor and Alan Litchman, both Democrats, by the way. We have the full clip. Trust me, it's something you're going to want to see. Alan Litchman, he's that professor and self-described election expert, right? He's the guy who predicts presidential elections based on his key system, his 16 keys or whatever. The most uptight pollster on TV. Anyone who's watched this guy can't argue with that characterization. He's uptight. He gets furious, absolutely furious whenever he's questioned about his keys. And last night, Cenk wasn't having it. And we also look at some very important news coming from the Trump team about big pharma ad spending on TV. We have the numbers from a Morgan Stanley report that just dropped. And this could actually be the thing that puts these legacy networks like CNN, MSNBC out of business for good. Morgan Stanley warning their clients, their big ticket clients, their 10-figure clients, that should Trump do this, it could spell the end for legacy TV news media. And more stories from around the country. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. Really helps out the channel. And consider subscribing so you don't miss these regular updates. So a few lone Republicans in Congress have drawn up articles of impeachment for President Joe Biden after he authorized the use of long-range precision-guided missiles into Russia. I can count them on one hand, folks. The number of Republicans who are outraged about this. Senate Republicans are largely indistinguishable from Democrats on Ukraine policy. In the House, they're a bit better, but even still, like, where the hell are the Republicans? Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, has said absolutely nothing about it after the lame duck president, Joe Biden, brings us to an inch away from all-out war with Russia, authorizing Ukraine to use our missiles and our personnel. Think about that. That's the key here. U.S. and NATO servicemen to strike targets deep inside Russian territory. What the hell is Joe Biden thinking? Doing this only weeks before the Trump administration comes to power. Why? What could be the point? Serious question. Did he get Trump's blessing on this? I don't know. I think he may have. It seems doubtful, but it doesn't make any logical sense otherwise. The more I think about it, makes no sense whatsoever. We haven't heard a peep from Biden or Trump about this. And don't forget, they met for almost 2 hours last week. I'm almost certain that Trump already has a deal worked out with Putin. Maybe he needed a bit more leverage or something like that to wrap this deal up. But this was risky, very, very risky. When Biden first threatened to do this weeks earlier, Vladimir Putin changed Russia's first strike policy with nuclear weapons. Russia's military doctrine prevented them from using nuclear weapons first. They could only do so if another country had fired on them first. Not the case anymore. That was a signal, a warning to the US and NATO. F around and find out, Joe Biden. Well, like the crazy warmonger he is, Joe Biden called Putin's bluff last week, unloading these ATACMS missiles into Russia, thinking Putin was all talk, wouldn't do anything in response. Well, he just did. And now U.S. servicemen are at risk. Watch.
In the last few minutes, the United States has announced it is closing its embassy in Kiev today and instructing employees there to shelter. That's after receiving what it describes as specific information of a potentially significant air attack.
And now we're paying the price. Think about that. Like, really consider it. Joe Biden's risking all-out war with weeks before a new administration. All over a small piece of land the size of Montana. A little bit bigger than Montana. That's halfway around the world. That means absolutely nothing to ordinary Americans. Doing so for shits and giggles. Because Ukraine can't win. It's an unwinnable war. The Pentagon knows it's unwinnable. So what's the point? Either Joe Biden wants to make Trump's promise to end this war before his inauguration impossible, or Joe just did what he was told to start a war that Trump and no one can get us out of. The point then being to draw us into another endless military conflict that the Pentagon can use to funnel money through, just like they did with Afghanistan. They lost their cash cow with Afghanistan. Ukraine replaces it. Julian Assange brought this to light years ago. Watch this.
Because the goal is not to completely subjugate Afghanistan. The goal is to use Afghanistan to wash money out of the tax bases of the United States, out of the tax bases of European countries, through Afghanistan and back into the hands of a transnational security elite. That is the goal, i.e. the goal is to have an endless war, not a successful war.
In another story, a lighter story, Alan Litchman, professor at American University in Washington, D.C., he's taught there since 1973. If you've been following this election coverage on mainstream media, you've most definitely seen Alec Litchman on TV, on CNN, MSNBC, ABC, all of them. He was all over the place for months leading up to the election, predicting with what he called 100% confidence that Kamala Harris would win and be the 47th president, because his keys are never wrong. My keys have never been wrong in 160 years because they're based on a scientific model, he said. The guy's an egomaniac. Crazy, insane the way he scolds reporters and anchors on TV who question his keys. Remember this?
The thinking that a clerk like Nate Silver, who just compiles polls, is doing anything scientific. Even his probabilities are made up. They're fabricated. They're not real probabilities, which are based on the law of large numbers. You'd have to have many, many, many elections.
So let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. So you think, and you had predicted, that's what we read, that you had predicted Biden was going to beat Trump. You think the polls showing that Biden was going to lose?
Stop.
Okay.
Stop.
Okay.
All right. Stop. You've misrepresented me. And that really makes me angry.
And if you follow this guy at all, because realize he was like all over corporate media. When Trump won 2 weeks ago, won big, by the way, how do you think Litchman reacted? Lost his freaking mind. Why were his keys wrong? Could it be because he has a major bias against Donald Trump? He read the keys the way he wanted to? A lot of people interpreted those keys differently than him. Or maybe his keys mean absolutely nothing. Who knows? Here's Alan Litchman explaining the reason why he's still an expert, and it's not his fault his keys were wrong. It's your fault. It's our fault. It's you racists' fault who voted for a fascist dictator. Watch this.
And the keys, because the keys depend upon a rational, pragmatic electorate deciding based on governance whether the incumbent party should get 4 more years. And we've seen the explosion of some trends that have existed before, but not to this extent. Disinformation. You know, Elon Musk is, I don't know how many hundreds of billions he has. He has been the director of misinformation. 2 billion views of his spreading of disinformation, not just about the economy, but about immigrants, about minorities. We've never seen disinformation at this scale. Next, we have never seen to this scale the agitation of 3 trends that have been very deeply embedded in American history: misogyny, racism, and xenophobia.
Well, last night on the Pierce Morgan show, Pierce Morgan Uncensored, Cenk Yugor and Alan Litchman, they go at it. 2 Democrats going at it. It's a pretty nice sight. Probably the best 2 minutes of television I've seen all year. Roll the tape.
Don't blame the voters. I think, look, we could get into this discussion, but one, I think you're blaming the voters. I think that's a terrible idea. Look, I debated Professor Litchman before. I told him his theories about the keys were absurd. I was right. He was wrong. I said he'd lose his keys.
No, you were
Couldn't
not
find
right,
them
and
before
I
the
was
election.
not wrong. And that's a cheap shot, and I won't stand for it.
Well, who won, brother?
You should not be taking cheap shots at me.
Who won?
You want to make your point,
live
make your
in
point.
a total
Don't make it
world
personal.
of denial.
I read your own followers' comments, and they all trashed you, every one of them, and supported me. So quiet with your personal attacks.
Come find out again.
Make whatever point you want. Don't make it personal.
You don't know anything. know anything.
You attacked me personally.
You're so deluded.
Oh, right. I've only been a professor for 51 years.
On this program, I've never been able to finish a thought.
How many books have you published? No, because you're personally attacking me again. Say whatever you want, but I'm not going to stand for personal
brother, you got it wrong.
Say
you were
whatever you want.
preposterously and stupidly wrong. So, okay, all right. Can I just finish a goddamn thought ever on this show?
No, not if you're personally I admitted I was wrong. I don't need you to call me stupid.
Okay.
Can I just say, it's great to see you Democrats all getting along so well.
Who taught you manners?
It's lovely to see a post-election harmony as you all come together again.
Hey, Alan, right now. Hey, Alan, you deserve a tall glass of shut-up juice, so can you just shut up for a second and let someone who knows what they're doing...
You're so right, Pierce. You're so right. We're so unified right now.
Make any point you want. So, I will not sit here and stand for personal attacks, for blasphemy against me. You don't need to do that. You don't
blasphemy against you? Who the hell are you? Are you Jesus Christ, you loser? Okay, can I just give the correct answer for once?
In another story, corporate media continues to bleed viewers, losing huge swaths of their audiences since Trump won 2 weeks ago. MSNBC losing over 40% of its viewership in a matter of a couple weeks. And Donald Trump may have just landed the death blow to legacy TV news, announcing he will be ending Big Pharma TV ads. Elon Musk following up with this post over the weekend: no advertising for pharma. Now, this is something we've been hearing about for a while. Ever since the pandemic, there's been a lot of focus on why America is the only first world country that even allows Big Pharma to advertise their drugs like their products, right? Like you're shopping for a vacuum cleaner or something. And this is actually a huge deal, because what most Americans don't realize is just how much money our news media is paid by Big Pharma. Look at this. In 2023, total revenue paid by drug companies like Pfizer, like Eli Lilly, Bristol Myers Squibb, to our media is insane. 2023, Comcast Corp paid over $1 billion, $1.09 billion. That's almost 20% of their total ad revenues. How about Warner Brothers Discovery, $868 billion in Big Pharma ad revenues in 2023. And guess who owns CNN, folks? Warner Brothers Discovery. And get this, how much did CNN make in net income last year? Only $750 million. So what would happen if CNN was to lose that $868 billion in revenues? They'd be done. They'd be out of business, or they'd have to completely rethink their business model, which, who knows, maybe that could be why they're in the process of laying off hundreds of employees right now. And it's not just CNN. Same thing's happening with MSNBC, which brought in close to $1 billion in total ad spend from big pharma companies. And look, it's now clear as day. The media landscape has changed significantly in the last few years. Americans no longer trust corporate media. They haven't for a long time, but the trust levels are just tanking recently. Their viewership since the election has crashed and burned. MSNBC losing 40% of their viewership since Trump won 2 weeks ago. And MSNBC is now openly admitting it, having an entire segment yesterday, Monday morning, Tuesday morning, covering how X is the media now. MSNBC Morning Joe admitting that they're irrelevant. Watch.
1 in 5 adults regularly get their news from influencers on social media. The number is even higher among younger Americans, with almost 40% under the age of 30 getting their news from those sources. According to the Pew Research Center, the social media site X remains the most widely accessed platform, followed by Instagram and YouTube.
I mean, that comes obviously for political news. And Mike, that's the challenge. You grew up in a newsroom like Gene grew up in a newsroom. I mean, that's a challenge for a lot of mainstream media sources is, do they make themselves relevant again to here 20% of adults who actually get influencers on social media?
I don't know
maybe somebody who makes baskets, and while they're making baskets, they look up and say, vote for candidate X.
I don't know how we make ourselves relevant again, because we can't compete with 20-second snippets on an iPhone, walking up the street,
morsels,
getting your entire news digest of the day in less than a minute on your phone as you're walking under the crowd with coffee in one hand and your phone in the other. I don't know how we catch up to that. Yeah.